Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
I'm Adrian Brown in Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, that for the past 69 years has been self-governing. But this place is also claimed by mainland China, and in the past it has threatened repeatedly to take Taiwan back by force if necessary. They've just had local elections here, and the ruling party did very badly. China, it seems, may well have been a factor. I've been talking to Joseph Wu, Taiwan's foreign minister, who has the job of selling Taiwan's message overseas at a time when China's doing all it can to isolate Taiwan internationally. He admits it's a frustrating job.
I can not think of any other country that has a more difficult foreign policy than Taiwan. China has been trying very hard to isolate Taiwan internationally.
Joseph Wu, Taiwan's foreign minister, talks to Al Jazeera. Joseph Wu, welcome to Talk to Al Jazeera. The last time I met you, you were Secretary General of the Democratic Progressive Party. You had just secured the presidency, the legislature. Your party had done very well in those elections. We've just had local elections and things haven't gone so well. What went wrong?
As a ruling party, we need to care about all kinds of policies. And the difficult thing is that if we want to be seen as a responsible government, a responsible political party, we need to carry our policies in a moderate way. And Taiwan is being seen as a moderate country, and Taiwan is a responsible country. But of course, that is going to be seen by our own supporters that the pace of reform is too slow, and therefore they may not be as supportive, as passionate as before.
But what was the issue that made voters turn away from you, do you think? Was it China? Was it the economy? Was it same-sex marriage?
In every major election here in Taiwan, China is always a factor, but it might not be the determining factor. In the presidential election, of course, China or the cross-strait policy has been debated, and it might be seen as more important than in other elections. And this is a local election, even though the China factor is playing a little part of it, but it's not an overwhelming factor in this particular election. And China is trying to interfere. And we saw that China is gearing up its disinformation campaign or airing its support for particular candidates, and that might be the small part the China factor is playing in this local election.
What evidence is there of China meddling in the election campaign?
The volume on the internet seem to be heavily influenced by the Chinese operation.
Were the IP addresses in China then, or?
Things like that. For example, the IP address in China or somewhere set up by China, and they try to infiltrate with their messages. There's a common knowledge over here in Taiwan. The 50 Cent army in China, they are roaming the Taiwan internet world. For example, some of our candidates have their Facebook filled with the Chinese languages in their Facebook account, and this is being seen as China trying to influence Taiwan's election. And of course, China is also trying to getting connected with some of the local politicians or local organizations, some of them trying to get benefit from China, things like that. And that is being seen as China trying to interfere in our local election.
Do you think that China's leaders will feel that their strategy of strangling Taiwan economically, diplomatically is working, and that now they're going to double down on their efforts to try and bring about reunification in 5 to 10 years, even sooner?
That is something that many people here in Taiwan have been discussing about. And if Taiwan's election can be seen as Chinese success of their interference, then it's going to be very difficult to stop China from trying again and again or double down on the interference in Taiwan's local election. And this is only a local election, and we have seen China trying to interfere in our election process, but when we have the national election in 2020, China might want to gear up its interference campaign against Taiwan. But as I said a little bit earlier, China might play a little part in our election. The most important part is the people's decision. And as I see it, people are intelligent enough to decide, what is right and what is wrong.
One thing is clear from these elections is that democracy in Taiwan is alive and kicking.
Yes.
China, of course, always likes to make mischief at times like this, and it says that the result shows that actually most people don't agree with your administration's sort of pro-independence stance. Have they got a point?
They might, but they also got it wrong. In 2016, when the president was elected, she was elected on the premise that she would adhere to the status quo. And therefore, this government is going to be very hard to describe as a pro-independence. If you look at the situation here in Taiwan, the PRC does not have any jurisdiction over Taiwan, and Taiwan is running by itself. We have a president, we have a parliament, and we have free media, and therefore Taiwan, in essence, is de facto independent. And any government, whether it's KMT government or the DPP government, is going to run this place, and it's not pro-independence or pro-unification. It's just Taiwan by itself.
One thing I don't understand, you said that the president accepts the status quo. So if she does, then why is China reacting the way it is? Because China always says, we want Taiwan to accept there is but one China, and Taiwan is a part of it. But you're saying the president accepts that?
No, the president accepts the status quo. And status quo, if you look at Taiwan itself, we have not been administered by China for any single day. China never has any jurisdiction over Taiwan for any single day. So the fact of the reality in Taiwan, or the status quo in between Taiwan and China, is that the two sides are separated. And for China to claim that we are part of them and they want to unify us against the will of the Taiwanese people, and that is against the status quo. And of course, that is not going to be supported by the Taiwan people, and that is not the policy of this government.
They might support it now, though. I mean, didn't the election show that perhaps people felt that the stance of your government to China was wrong? But perhaps it's time to say, we do accept we're part of China. I mean, if you said that, China would loosen the economic noose tomorrow, and things can go back the way they were.
If you do a public opinion survey again today, and I'm sure people are going to tell you the opposite, I think the people are going to say that no, we are not part of China, and we are not going to pursue unification with China, even though some of the local candidates in this election might have the tendency of pursuing better relations with China. But seeing them as pursuing a policy of unifying with China is going to be wrong. And after all, this is a local election, and the cross-strait relations has not been debated in this election, and therefore cross-strait relations or China factor is not a key factor in this election, and therefore we should not interpret the election as if Taiwan people choose to unify with China or to choose to pursue another route with China.
You're in charge of spreading Taiwan's message to the world. But how hard is that when Taiwan's not part of the United Nations, you're not part of the World Health Assembly, Interpol? How difficult is it for you? I mean, the frustrations must be enormous.
You are absolutely right. I can not think of any other country that has a more difficult foreign policy than Taiwan. China has been trying very hard to isolate Taiwan internationally, to prevent Taiwan from having official relations with other countries, or to prevent Taiwan from participating in international organizations. And China is also trying to change Taiwan's designation when Taiwan is being described by international businesses. They try to change Taiwan from Taiwan into Taiwan Common China or Taiwan Province of China. And for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs over here, we need to develop substantive relations with the like-minded countries. And we also have to safeguard those countries that are still having relations with Taiwan.
And in the last 2 years, 5 countries that had relations with you have defected to China. That must hurt.
It is difficult for us. And what we try to do is to make sure that the senior government officials and senior government officials in our diplomatic allies are highly connected. And I think most important trait of Taiwan is a democracy already. And we are very proud of that. And many of the like-minded countries continue to praise Taiwan as a beacon. And because Taiwan is already a democracy, and therefore we are able to develop closer and closer ties with like-minded countries.
But when former friends like El Salvador, Burkina Faso say, sorry, we're going to recognize Beijing, there must be this sort of sense of betrayal, because these countries, up until then, that point, have been your friends, your allies.
That's right. When that happened, when they decided that they want to establish diplomatic ties with the People's Republic of China and sever ties with Taiwan, of course, people here feel betrayed, and that kind of sentiment can be very strong here. But since they decide to choose China, that's their choice. And the important thing for Taiwan is that we want to make sure that those diplomatic allies remain loyal to Taiwan, are getting the right thing from Taiwan. For example, the education, capacity building, job training, or agricultural development, things like this will continue to help these countries. And I think many of the countries realize that they are not able to get those kinds of support from the People's Republic of China, but they are getting steady support from Taiwan on those items that I just mentioned.
Was it a surprise when El Salvador defected, or did you know in advance it was going to happen?
We detected some signs that they might be negotiating with China, and therefore we tried very hard to see whether there's anything else we can work on.
So you offer them money, or what do you do? Does it become like a bidding war?
No, it doesn't work that way. My deputy traveled to El Salvador, speaking to the senior officials over there. And I myself also traveled to El Salvador, speaking to their very senior officials, including the president himself, and to ask him whether there's any issue in the relationship that we should work on more. And what they said is that every aspect of the relationship is going very well. And therefore, they try to hide from us on their negotiations with China. And the leadership of El Salvador not only trying to hide from Taiwan, they also try to hide from the United States or other countries in their secret negotiations with China.
Is it money that wins them over? China just simply says, how much do you need?
If you read the news these couple of days, you can realize that it's money. And it's China offering a huge amount of money. From the public record, these couple of days, China offered $15 billion to El Salvador. And of course, that is not the game that Taiwan is in. What Taiwan wants is solid friendship, is to be able to help the people.
It seems that China's strategy is to pick off one by one those remaining countries that have diplomatic relations with Taiwan.
Yes.
Which raises the question, what happens if they succeed in doing that and there are no countries left that recognize you? What happens then?
As a Minister of Foreign Affairs, I wouldn't try to envision that kind of result. But I think China also has other objectives over Taiwan, other than cutting off all the diplomatic allies of Taiwan. If you listen to the top leaders of China, they continue to say that they want to win hearts and minds of the Taiwanese people. But when they engage in a very negative way of isolating Taiwan or choking off Taiwan's international space, that is the opposite of what they say they want to achieve, winning hearts and minds of the Taiwanese people. And you can see whenever the Chinese negative campaign against Taiwan is going on, the distance in between Taiwan and China is getting further and further apart, and I'm sure that is not what China wants to see.
But part of your job is to sell Taiwan, to promote Taiwan. How do you describe Taiwan? How do you promote Taiwan when you go around the world and visit various international organizations? What's the key point you stress?
The first point, of course, Taiwan is the democracy. Taiwan is a mature democracy. And Taiwan can be seen as a model of democracy in this part of the world. And the second aspect is Taiwan's status in economic development. Taiwan is already being seen as a model of economic development as well. Even though the growth rate in the last few years might not be great, but Taiwan is undergoing transformation from the old manufacturing-based economy now to innovation-based economy. If you look at the trade relations in between Taiwan and Europe, which is very far away, the figure is growing. And if you look at the investment of Taiwan companies in the very far away countries in Europe or in India or in Japan or in the United States or in Mexico, the number is also growing. And therefore, it's important to do business with Taiwan as well.
The situation in the Taiwan Straits seems fraught at times. China has been carrying out military exercises, as Taiwan has. China's been sailing warships very close to your waters. The United States has been sending warships into those waters. Is there a worry that the brinkmanship gets out of control and you risk conflict?
Of course, that is something that the decision makers here are watching very carefully. But I think we need to watch on our own back. We need to watch on our own security. If China is coming too close to our water or coming too close to our airspace, we need to have the sufficient defense capabilities to defend ourselves. And from whatever we can see is the Chinese expansionism that is causing all this trouble. And therefore, any kind of effort in the international community trying to reduce this threat of war or trying to stop China's expansionism should be welcomed.
Has a Trump presidency been good for Taiwan?
Yes, very much so. President Trump received a phone call from President Tsai to congratulate him. And Vice President Pence has also been a very strong supporter of Taiwan. He has a track record when he was in the Congress. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has also a long track record of supporting Taiwan. So altogether, we are seeing the very friendly gesture coming from the Trump administration toward Taiwan.
And that gesture includes the chance to buy more arms from
Yes.
Washington, but you still can't get F-35s, can you? I mean, there's still stuff militarily that the United States won't sell you. That must be a bit frustrating, because if they were a true friend, they'd give you what you wanted.
They give us what we want, and we are in a series of discussions with the United States. But of course, I cannot get into the details of this discussion. But if you look at in June 2017, they already made available to Taiwan a huge package of arms, and that is what we want. And that is what we need. And I think in Taiwan's defense, there's much more than just one particular item. And Taiwan and the United States have been discussing very intensely on how Taiwan can beef up its own defense. And we are trying in every aspect rather than focusing on one item.
When President Tsai had that phone conversation with President Donald Trump, and he afterwards seemed to suggest that perhaps he wasn't necessarily bound by the one China policy anymore, your spirits must have risen here in Taiwan, because for the first time it began to seem possible that perhaps the United States was going to walk away from something that's been the cornerstone of Sino-US relations for 40 years.
We are more realistic and pragmatic than thinking along that line. We understand that the United States has a relations with China to administer. And of course, maintaining good relations with China is always one of the policy priority of the United States. And we are fine with that policy because that policy has room for us to work with the United States.
In a few days' time, President Trump and President Xi Jinping are going to meet at the G20.
Yes.
Taiwan is part of the current feud between Washington and Beijing. What do you want to come out of that meeting? What does Taiwan want?
Well, if you look at the high-level meetings in between the United States and China, Taiwan policy or Taiwan as a subject of being raised by the Chinese leaders almost in every occasion. But the response from the U.S. decision makers is almost always the same, that the United States is abide by its one China policy. And if Taiwan becomes a topic in their discussion, I'm sure President Trump or senior officials in the United States is going to come up with a similar statement.
At the moment, China is led by possibly the most powerful leader since Chairman Mao. Mm-hmm. Do you think he wants to be the Chinese president that brings Taiwan back into the fold? Because given the level of intimidation, the war games that have been going on in the Taiwan Straits, that seems to be what we're heading towards.
That might be possible, but I think that's a puzzle throughout the world on what Chairman Xi is thinking about. If I were to put myself in his shoes, I would have difficult times in understanding why Taiwan should be a priority in his policy. Look at the regional situation inside China. This Uyghurs problem that he needs to deal with. There's a problem in Tibet that he has to deal with, and the Catholics are being seen by him as the one who is capable of doing the organization, and therefore he needs to use a lot of force in suppressing the freedom of religion in China. And other than that, the more important factor is a slowing economy. Slowing economy means social instability. And to an authoritarian country, that might be the most difficult to maintain the legitimacy of that government. And therefore, there's plenty for President Xi to worry about. And his relations with Japan is not good. Relations with Korea might not be good. There's a tension in South China Sea. There's a whole relations for him to manage with the United States. And therefore, he has so many problems to deal with. And if he wants to, overcome the Taiwan issue, that might put a less important issue on his plate. It might not be good for him.
What keeps you awake at night?
The most difficult thing, as I told you, in my position is China trying to interfere in our relations with the rest of the world.
That's what keeps you awake sometimes.
That's right. Our relations with the diplomatic allies, that is something that we need to continue to treasure, and we continue to watch out for to prevent China from having the opportunity of grabbing them away from Taiwan. And we also worry about China's actions against Taiwan's participation in international organizations. We continue to try to pursue our observership or membership in some major international organizations, and China is making it very difficult for us. But my job is to tell the international community that the rights of the 23 million people here in Taiwan deserve to be recognized by the international community. If a small country can be represented in World Health Organization, the health right of the Taiwanese people should be recognized by the international community as well. If small countries can be represented in International Civil Aviation Organization, the rights of the Taiwanese people should be recognized as well. If cross-country crime is very important to every country, Taiwan should not be left out to the Interpol. And therefore, this is something that we continue to advocate, and that will motivate myself to advocate to the international community.
And you'll keep up your efforts to try to rejoin the United Nations?
I will continue to advocate that. The United Nations is organized or formed based on the concept that every country should be represented in the United Nations, and we'll continue to try to pursue the goal of being part of the United Nations. But before we can be a member of the United Nations, there are practical ways for Taiwan to be able to make contribution. For example, in practical organizations, like what I say, UNFCCC or WHO, it's even difficult for us to make a contribution. But what's important for us is to seek opportunity for Taiwan to be able to make contributions to the UN system.
And just so our viewers around the world understand, you're saying Taiwan is a country?
Yes, of course. We have a president that is democratically elected, and I just don't see that the non-state or non-country that has a president. And we also have a parliament that is also democratically elected. And we have our own currency system, and we have a military. And we also have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs that issue visa and passport, and that is being recognized by the international community. And Taiwan is a country, just like all other countries in the world.
And what name should it be at the United Nations?
We are not getting into that right now. Taiwan's official title is the Republic of China, and I think this is what the people here are used to. But of course, Taiwan is also being called Taiwan, but the people here in Taiwan are not discussing on what kind of name Taiwan should use to enter the United Nations. We are trying to participate, but we are not trying to seek membership at this moment.
Joseph Wu, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.